guys, Matt Cobb here with another daily devotion for you. We are wrapping up James really soon. We only have a couple more sections left, and so I wanted to kind of give you an overview of what we're going to be doing through the end of the year, because we have about 3 more sections in James that we're going to cover, and that'll take us up to Thanksgiving. Then I'll do a little special Thanksgiving devotion, something that maybe even you can do with your families together and stuff like that. And then through the month of December, going to do some Christmas kind of themed ones. So I'm really excited for that. I think it'll be a lot of fun to just cover some of those familiar passages, maybe see them in new, fresh ways, or maybe even things that we've seen before, but we needed to be reminded of during this year. And then we'll have one more Thursday before the end of the year. And so I'll talk about the newness and New Year's and, all of the same kind of resolutions that we make and things like that, and leading into a new year and so forth. But then also at the beginning of next year, and what we're going to do in these daily devotions, at least that I'm going to be doing, is I want to do something a little different. And so it's going to be new and challenging for me as well, too. And I want to walk through the book of Genesis, but not quite the same way that we've done with this through the book of James. But I'm going to give you a passage to read, and then you can pause the video and read it right then. And then we'll kind of unpack some of the story and applicable elements of that story and things, because we may do some larger chunks of scripture so that we can be working through that book of Genesis. So just wanted to give you a kind of a heads up of some things that are going to be happening here soon. But today's devotion is out of James chapter 5, verses 7 through 11. And it's patience in action. So James has been lining out through the entire letter that he's written all of these practical things for us to do in living out our faith. And then when he starts, and this is chapter 5, verses 7 through 11, it says, "Therefore, brothers and sisters, be patient until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth and is patient with it until it receives the early and the late rains. You also must be patient. Strengthen your hearts, because the Lord's coming is near. Brothers and sisters, do not complain about one another, so that you will not be judged. Look, the judge stands at the door. Brothers and sisters, take the prophets who spoke in the Lord's name as an example of suffering and patience. See, we count as blessed those who have endured. You have heard of Job's endurance and have seen the outcome that the Lord brought about. The Lord is compassionate and merciful." So he starts this section out with "therefore." And as many of you have probably heard before, when you see "therefore" in the Bible, find out what it's there for. And so all of these things that he's been lining out, now he kind of capstones everything and says, "Therefore." And so he jumps into this leaning into the patience as we wait upon the Lord. And this patience, the word that we get there really means long suffering. And so this patience is not passive, sitting around doing nothing. It is an active patience, long suffering. And then he uses this illustration of a farmer. And as I've mentioned before, I'm not a farmer. I don't grow things. I have a brown thumb or a dead thumb, black thumb maybe even. I don't get things to grow very well. But I understand the concepts, and what James is trying to use here is talking about how a farmer, he plants his crops and then he waits. It even says he waits for the precious fruit. And this waiting is eager anticipation or expectation. So he plants and he's expecting something to come from it. So he's waiting. But then James goes on to say, and is patient with it. He's long suffering. So even after he's planted, he's not done working. And so that's the first thing that I want us to see, is that as we're patience in action, as we're active in our waiting, our long suffering, one, we need to keep working. The farmer can't bring about the rains. He says he's patient with it until it receives the early and late rains. The farmer can't bring those rains. So there are certain things that he can't do. But there are things that he can do while he is waiting and preparing the soil and the fields to receive that rain. He can eliminate weeds. He can keep away the bugs. He can remove dying plants, trim and prune so that those that are active and living receive more of the nutrients that are needed. So the key element to take from this illustration that James is saying is to keep doing the things that you can do as you wait with anticipation and are long suffering for the things that only God can do. So there are things that only God can do. Only God could bring the rains. But while the farmer is waiting and long suffering, there are things that he can do. So that's what we need to take away from it is while we wait for what only God can do, we do the things that we can do and keep working. Second thing is to partner with others and even to keep growing those partnerships. Look at what he says. He says, brothers and sisters, do not complain about one another. And that word complain is an interesting word because it's a Greek root where we kind of get our medical term of stenosis, which is narrowing. And so it's this concept of things that are being narrowed and increasing in pressure. And so he's saying, don't narrow things down with your brothers and sisters. Don't cause pressure. Don't drive other people away. But instead, we need to do the opposite and grow and expand and include people with us. So that it's not just us working, but we're working alongside of others and we're sharing the load. We're working together. So we keep working, we increase partnerships, we don't narrow them down. And then the third thing is that we remember. This last section that he says, it says, take the prophets as an example. Take Job as an example. So, there are people that have gone before that we can learn from. There are things that they have gone through and walked through and given us wisdom to be able to avoid some of those pitfalls in our own lives. And then we can be examples to those that come after us as well too. So we remember the example of others before us, but then also we remember the blessings that are in store, that are ours even right now. The last part that he says is the Lord is compassionate and merciful. So there is compassion and mercy available to each and every one of us. We remember that while we are waiting, God has good things in store. If the story, there's often the line that says, if the story isn't good, the story's not done yet. Because that's how God works. Romans 8:28 says all things work together for the good to those who love God and are called according to his purpose. So if the story isn't good right now, God's not done with the story. And eventually the story ends with us being in heaven with Jesus. Whether we die physically or Jesus comes back, we'll be with him in heaven forever. And that is a good ending to any story. So as we are active in our patience, as we're patience in action, we're going to, 1, keep working, 2, partner with others and increase those partnerships, and 3, remember the examples that have been set before us and the blessings that God has in store both now and forever. All right, guys, be encouraged. We're going to wrap up James here in a couple of weeks and then do some Christmas and then move on to some new things. So I hope it has been a blessing for you guys sticking with us throughout this entire year. And I look forward to what we're going to do in the new year as well, too. So have a great weekend, guys. We'll catch you later.